No sing. I didn't expect the truth to arrive so quietly. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic confession that split the room in half. Doc, it came the way so many life-changing things do, between bites of food, in a room full of people who believed everything was fine. Dodd. My father set his fork down, not hard, not slow enough to be suspicious, just deliberate. Never ting. He looked at me the way you look at someone you trust to do the hard thing and said, "You've always been strong. You can handle it." That sentence didn't sound cruel, and that's what made it dangerous, because cruelty wrapped in calm sounds reasonable, almost kind, almost. In that moment, something I'd felt my entire life finally took shape. I wasn't loved for who I was, nevered. I was valued for what I could carry, and I had been carrying this family since I was a child. I'm a woman, and for most of my life, people assumed I was the steady one. My name is Claire, never sinks. From the outside, our life looked solid, respectable, hard-working, close. We owned a greenhouse on the edge of town, a real one, glass walls, steel frames, soft yellow light glowing inside at night. Now, people used to slow their cars when they passed it, like beauty deserved a second look. My parents built it from nothing, or at least that's what everyone said. No one. What no one asked was who kept it standing. A greenhouse is an interesting thing. It looks warm, safe, transparent, but it's also fragile. Tink. Every panel depends on the others. Every system, heat, water, structure must be constantly maintained. Miss one detail and the whole place starts to crack. Teat. I learned that early. 2. I started working there when I was 12, not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. 12. I learned how to carry soil bags heavier than my body, how to tie irrigation lines with numb fingers in winter, to work, how to work in silence when you know complaining won't change anything. I didn't call it responsibility back then. I called it normal. Day. That's the first thing you learn as a child who carries too much. You stop questioning the weight, nain. My younger sister Maya didn't work in the greenhouse. She didn't need to. Dodd. She was creative. She just needs time. She's sensitive. Words that followed her like protection. I had different words. Reliable, capable, strong. Strong children don't get protected. They get prepared to sacrifice, prepared to endure, prepared to stay quiet when things feel unfair. Neverment. When I was 15, I worked weekends. When I was 18, I managed shipments. When I was 22, I ran operations. I knew the business better than anyone. Knew which pipes froze first in winter, which suppliers could be trusted, which numbers didn't add up unless you looked twice. People praised my parents. No one praised me, and somehow I told myself that was okay. I told myself this was temporary, that once things stabilized, everything would balance out. Never does, because systems built on imbalance depend on you believing relief is coming. Daughters. There's a moment in every story like this where you realize something important, not suddenly, not dramatically. It creeps in, nextant. For me, it came on mornings when I woke up already tired, on nights when I lay awake replaying conversations, wondering how I became the solution to every problem that wasn't mine. I noticed how my parents talked about Maya. Don't pressure her. She's still finding herself. And how they talked about me. Can you handle this? We need you to step up. Same family, different expectations. One child was allowed to be unfinished. 9. The other was expected to hold everything together. Noun. If you've ever been that child, the one who adjusts, adapts, absorbs, you know how subtle it is. No one says, "We're choosing you to sacrifice." They say, "You're better at this. You don't mind. You're strong." Strength, when forced, becomes a cage. And cages are hardest to see when they're made of glass. Thanksgiving was supposed to be easy. Just a dinner, just family. I didn't plan to say anything. I never do. Deed. But exhaustion has a way of slipping past your filters. I said I was tired. Just that. Night. I suggested carefully that maybe we could hire help at the greenhouse, that maybe I couldn't keep doing everything alone. My father didn't raise his voice. Nading. He didn't need to. He smiled the way people do when they think they're being reasonable. Maya needs time to figure things out, he said. You know that. Then he looked at me, that look, the one that assumes compliance. You've always been able to handle more. My mother nodded without thinking. Maya stayed silent, staring at her plate, and suddenly the room felt colder. Daughters, that was the moment everything rearranged itself in my head, not because of what he said, but because of what it revealed. They weren't unaware. They weren't confused. They were comfortable letting me carry what they didn't want to face, comfortable benefiting from my silence, comfortable mistaking endurance for consent. Let me pause here and ask you something. Not out loud, just to yourself. Have you ever realized, all at once, that the people closest to you don't see you as a person, but as a function? If you have, you know the feeling. It's not anger. It's clarity. And clarity changes things. After dinner, my father said something else. If this is too much for you, he shrugged almost casually, the door is right there. He didn't mean it as an invitation. No. He meant it as a reminder of my place. He expected guilt. He expected hesitation. He expected me to stay. What he didn't expect was movement. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stood up slowly, reached into my pocket and placed my keys on the table. The sound they made, metal against wood, cut through the room sharper than any raised voice. I'm done, I said, not loudly, not angrily, just done. I won't be running the greenhouse anymore. I won't be covering expenses. I won't be fixing problems I didn't create. My mother laughed, nervous and disbelieving. You don't mean that. But I did. Because boundaries aren't punishments, they're exits, and exits are terrifying to people who rely on you staying trapped, never mated. In that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear, not mine, theirs. Because when the strongest support steps away, the structure doesn't argue, it cracks. And that's where this story truly begins, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a quiet decision made at a dinner table and the sound of keys hitting wood. For the first few days after I left, nothing happened. That's the part no one tells you about. When you finally step out of a system that's been feeding on you, the collapse doesn't come immediately. At first, everything looks the same. The lights stay on, the doors still open. People convince themselves it was never that serious. That illusion is comforting, and it's also temporary. Different. The greenhouse kept running for a week, then 2. Suppliers started calling me, not my parents, not Maya, me, out of habit. Mostly, but also because I was the one who always answered, the one who fixed things. The one who knew what to do when a shipment was late or a payment didn't clear. I let the calls go to voicemail. That wasn't cruelty. That was consistency, because I'd already said I was done. By the 3rd week, the messages changed. They weren't polite anymore. They were confused, then frustrated, then scared. Invoices hadn't been paid. Orders were delayed. The heating system malfunctioned twice. My mother called. I didn't answer. My father texted. I didn't respond. Maya sent a message that simply said, "Are you really doing this?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then turned the phone face down. Here's something important to understand. When you've been the responsible one for a long time, people don't see your absence as a boundary. They see it as betrayal, because your presence was never optional to them. It was expected. I thought the hardest part would be emotional, the guilt, the doubt, the urge to go back and fix things. But the truth surprised me. I slept better than I had in years, not because everything was resolved, but because for the first time nothing was being silently placed on my shoulders while I wasn't looking. Then the bank called. It wasn't urgent at first, just a routine question about account activity tied to the greenhouse. Number, I answered casually, expecting nothing, and that's when the numbers stopped making sense. Withdrawals I didn't recognize, transfers I didn't authorize. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, spread out carefully, as if someone believed subtlety made it acceptable. Dodd. By the time I added it all up, my chest tightened. 6 figures. Gone. In my name. Dot. That was the moment everything shifted. Up until then, this had been about boundaries, about exhaustion, about emotional survival. Now it was about something else. Trust, and how easily it had been abused. Dodd. I didn't confront them, not yet. I requested statements, documented timelines, compared signatures, because here's a truth that took me years to learn. Distant, explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you is a waste of breath. Preparation is quieter than confrontation and far more effective. Diz. As I gathered the evidence, I started noticing patterns I'd ignored before. Nain. How often I'd been asked to just cover this once. How frequently expenses were shifted into my name for convenience. How easily responsibility became entitlement. D-sus. This hadn't started recently. It had just escalated, because when people realize you won't push back, they push further. Let me ask you something here. If you discovered that people you loved had been quietly taking from you, not just emotionally but materially, what would you do? Would you walk away and protect your peace, or would you demand accountability? If you believe walking away is strength, type 1. If you believe consequences matter, type 0. Don't justify it. Just notice what your instinct says. Next hint. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my office, unannounced, all 3 of them. W. I saw them through the glass before they came inside. My parents walking stiffly, Maya trailing behind, arms crossed, jaw tight. Noun. For a moment, I felt the old reflex, the urge to stand, to explain, to smooth things over. Then I didn't. I stayed seated, and that alone changed the dynamic. My father spoke first. "You've gone too far," he said. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Can we talk?" Too far, as if stepping away from being exploited was an offense. My mother cried, said she didn't understand how things had gotten so complicated. Maya accused me of being selfish, of abandoning the family. I listened. That surprised them, because I wasn't defensive. I was observant, Natella too. When they finished, I spoke. "I know about the money," I said calmly. Noun. The room shifted, not dramatically but subtly, like air pressure changing before a storm. My father denied it immediately. My mother looked confused. Maya went very quiet, and that silence told me everything. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I continued. "The withdrawals stopped today. No raised voice. No threats, just information." That's when I saw fear, not panic, fear, the kind that comes when control disappears. Here's something no one prepares you for. When you stop holding everything together, you don't destroy the system. You reveal it, and revealed systems don't survive. Dog. They left without resolving anything. No apologies, no admissions, just tension, and an unspoken promise that this wasn't over. They were right. It wasn't. Ninded. In the weeks that followed, the greenhouse began to fail in visible ways. Plants wilted, shipments stopped, bills piled up. Maya had to get a job for the first time in her life. .com. My parents started making calls they'd never had to make before. None of them called me again, and that silence was louder than any argument. Dud. I drove past the greenhouse one evening. The lights were off. For the first time, it didn't look warm. It looked fragile, exactly what it had always been. Day. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and felt something unexpected. Relief, not because they were struggling, but because I finally wasn't. Devaloo. But here's the thing about systems built on exploitation. They don't collapse quietly. They fight back, days, and what was coming next would force a final confrontation, one none of us could walk away from. Daughter. There's a moment in every confrontation where you realize something important. It's not when voices get loud or accusations fly. 9. It's when the other side understands that you are no longer afraid of losing them. That moment came on a gray Tuesday morning. Dade. They didn't call this time. They sent a letter. Not handwritten, not emotional, official, the kind of envelope people use when they want distance to feel like authority. Inside was a demand. Daughters. They wanted access restored, accounts unfrozen, operations returned to normal. They called it a misunderstanding. Creates. I called it confirmation, because people who truly don't know what they've done don't start with demands. Time. I didn't respond immediately. I took a walk instead. The city was loud, but my head wasn't. Hours. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what someone else needed from me. Donna. I wasn't calculating how to soften my words or absorb the impact of someone else's choices. I was simply present. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. It never had been. Money was just the language they used when control stopped working. Node. A week later they asked for a meeting. Neutral location. No lawyers present. Just family, my mother said in her message. Night. I agreed not because I owed them, but because closure, when chosen freely, is a gift to yourself. We met at the greenhouse. Their choice. W. They wanted familiarity on their side, but familiarity can be dangerous when you finally see clearly. Dactynt. The glass panels were cracked, not shattered, just enough to let the cold in. Plants leaned toward the light, struggling. Never D. I stood there and realized something quietly profound. This place never survived because it was strong. It survived because I was. Never says. They arrived together, my parents first, Maya behind them. She looked different, older, not wiser, just tired. Reality does that. Health. My father spoke first, long explanations, careful phrasing. He used words like pressure, confusion, necessity, no one. Meant for things to get so complicated. I listened. Nest. Then my mother cried. She talked about family, about sacrifice, about how much they'd done for me. That one almost worked. Almost. Gratitude, because gratitude, when weaponized, sounds like debt. Maya spoke last, her voice shaking. You didn't have to do this, she said. You could have just helped us figure it out. There it was, the core belief that my role was still to fix things. I looked at her and realized something else. Now, this wasn't just about my parents. It was about what she had been taught to expect from me. When they finished, they waited. For forgiveness, for compromise, for me to bend. 9. Instead, I said this. I'm not here to negotiate my worth. Silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't rush to fill itself. I told them about the documentation, the statements, the signatures, the lawyer, not as a threat, but as a boundary. Ting, I won't be moving forward quietly, I said, but I'm also not interested in destroying anyone. I paused. That choice depends on what happens next. Here's the truth no one likes to hear. Boundaries don't punish people, they expose them. My father looked angry. My mother looked afraid. Maya looked lost. For the first time, none of them were looking at me as the solution. 9s. They were looking at me as an equal, and they didn't know how to handle that. We didn't hug. We didn't resolve everything. But something fundamental shifted. The illusion that I would always be there, no matter the cost, was gone. And illusions, once broken, don't grow back. The legal process moved slowly, deliberately, not dramatically. Money was returned. Access was restricted. Responsibilities redistributed. The greenhouse didn't survive it, not because I left, but because it was never designed to function without someone absorbing all the pressure. 9 months later, the place closed. No announcement, no goodbye, just dark glass and overgrown weeds. People asked me if I felt guilty. I didn't, because guilt is what you feel when you abandon something you owe. I didn't owe them my life. One morning, I drove past the greenhouse one last time. The door was locked, the glass opaque with dust, Nestus, and I realized I was breathing freely, deeply, without bracing. Here's what people don't tell you about being the strong one. You don't realize how much you're carrying until you finally put it down. And when you do, you don't collapse. You expand. Maya eventually reached out not to ask for help, but to talk. That mattered. It didn't fix everything, but it changed the direction. W's. Sometimes growth comes late, sometimes it comes painfully, but it doesn't come at all if someone keeps shielding you from consequence. No. As for my parents, we speak carefully, with distance, with honesty, and with boundaries that no longer require explanation. D's. That's the thing about boundaries. Once enforced, they don't need defending. Nain. If you've stayed with me this long, there's a reason. This story isn't just about a greenhouse. Nate. It's about families that confuse love with usefulness, about children who grow up thinking their value is measured by endurance. D's. About people who mistake silence for agreement, and about what happens when that silence ends. Let me say this clearly. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for stepping away. You are not weak for refusing to carry what was never yours. Nam, sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for everyone involved, is stop holding up a structure that was built on your pain. 9. If this story felt familiar, you already know what that means. If you believe walking away saved me, type 1. 9. If you believe holding people accountable was necessary, type 0. No explanations needed, just honesty. Daughter, the glass house didn't fall apart because I left. It fell apart because it was never real warmth to begin with. Dislick, and I finally stepped outside, into the cold, into the quiet, into my own life.